Hi, I'm Danny Glover, and you're watching Joburg Today.
Do not copy and paste posts onto Twitter before you've read and understood it, especially if you're a public figure. A harsh lesson learned by model and TV personality Shashi Naidu after she posted pro-Israeli statements on Twitter that led to a social media backlash. Shashi lost business contracts and also received some death threats. However, she apologized on Instagram and later apologized again at a press conference held at the BDS South Africa offices in Johannesburg. She explained to the media that in fact the words posted were not her own and she had little knowledge of the humanitarian crisis facing Palestinians. Following social media responses to her apology, we reached out to BDS South Africa.
I think I was speaking to a friend of mine this morning that asked me why would I be doing the trip to Palestine, and I said that, look, I've made a very public apology, and a part of that apology was to educate myself and to re-educate myself. And me approaching BDS, and I want to make that very clear, is I'd approached BDS myself, but I also want to know that in no way does this mean that I'm radicalizing myself to one side or radicalizing myself to another, because I feel like almost this entire debate is also sparked to become a political debate, and you almost felt caught up in the middle. I feel for me this is a humanitarian issue. I've been very disappointed in myself for not knowing and being fully aware of what was happening in Gaza, and sometimes ignorance can be just as bad as having those thoughts. So it's been a tough couple of days, but I think a lot of people have asked me about are you worried about losing work? Are you the endorsements? I think from my side that is not a primary concern of mine at the moment. I think rightfully so a lot of brands should distance themselves from all this conflict, but the one thing I think I've realized in all of this, I said to Mohammed, do you think anyone will come today? I was expecting to see one or two people here, but I do have a voice. So if that is the only thing I have left, I can use that now in a positive way, or I could sit back and say, look, I give up, I'm going to cry myself, and we all know I cried, but I can stay crying, I can say I'm going to kill myself, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the voice that I have to discuss the humanitarian issues, to share what I learn. And as I said to him, it's a journey, it's going to be a journey for me. And I hope that other people that might perhaps have been ignorant before can share in that journey with me, learn more, know more, understand more. I feel certainly in the last 48 hours, the last 3 days, my eyes have been opened to what is happening. And you can't unsee, when you've seen, you can't unsee that, you can't unread it. So I think my life has changed its course in a way and probably started a completely new journey for me. But yeah, I think, sorry can't just be a word, it must be an action, and my apologies will come in my actions moving forward.
Mohammed Desai, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you in studio to host you today. Following that press conference that was held with Shashi Naidu, her apology was mainly well received on social media, but again, mixed sentiment coming through on social media, and I think not a fuller understanding of your engagement with her prior to the press conference.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for covering such an important issue. I think it's really a turning point for both the Palestinian solidarity issue, but also the meaning of celebrities, musicians, artists, and high-profile individuals participating in important human rights issues. Here we see a great amount of awareness that has been created amongst the entertainment sector, but also amongst our general public on this issue of Israel's occupation and Israel's apartheid policies towards the Palestinian people.
From your understanding, why is this such a divisive issue here in South Africa?
If anything, I think that actually it's a uniting issue. I think that you see various South African churches, for example, you see South African Jewish organizations, you see members of the Muslim community, trade unions, the governing party of this country, the ANC, all coming together with one clear voice, and that is expressing our solidarity with the Palestinian people. In the last 1 year alone, for example, you have the African National Congress, the ruling party of this country, deciding to downgrade the South African embassy in Israel.
Sure.
You have the United Congregational Church of Southern Africa with over 500,000 followers, 4,000 churches across the Southern African region adopting the BDS boycott of Israel. You have a small organization but an important organization called the South African Jews for a Free Palestine. And here you have members of the Jewish community coming out and supporting the Palestinian struggle against Israeli apartheid. And so I really think that the Palestinian solidarity issue in this country is uniting us, much like how the anti-apartheid struggle once united us, for example, in the United Democratic Front.
Yeah.
Now, you'll always have detractors, for example, supporters of apartheid South Africa that kept on saying, we just want peace. Stop talking about the end of apartheid. Just let's learn to live together. This was what Hendrik Verwoerd and others said, that look, it's about us living together in peace and harmony without addressing the racial subjugation and oppression of our people. And likewise with Israel, you have Israeli supporters that keep on saying, let's just live in peace without addressing the fact that Israel was created in 1948 at the expense of the indigenous Palestinian population, and this form of what people call colonization, the moving out and shifting out of the indigenous population to make way for an external population, that this is really the root cause of the issue that we are talking about. This issue has not been going on for thousands of years. It's an issue that has started just 70 or 75 years ago. And if anything, we're finding a huge shift in terms of the Palestinian, or in terms of support for the Palestinian issue. Worldwide, you have various churches, you have various pension funds, you have various artists, musicians that have all beginning to endorse the BDS boycott, or, for example, lending their support to the Palestinian struggle against Israeli apartheid. And so we really are building a mass support worldwide, and this sort of support applies pressure from the top, whilst on the bottom, whilst in Palestine, you have a thriving resistance to Israeli apartheid, a similar resistance to what we had here in South Africa during the 1980s. This resistance in the 1980s was supported by members of the international community by imposing sanctions, and likewise, we are seeing a similar trend in Israel-Palestine. And it's only really a matter of time where we are going to see a just peace in the land of Palestine for all people that reside there.
It's very inspiring what you just said in terms of the support outreach for this very important, sad, conflicting humanitarian crisis in the Middle East. You also mentioned, and it's interesting what you said, that this issue is uniting people and not dividing people. Coming back to the issue here at play in South Africa recently, the social media backlash following Shashi's posts on Twitter. Certainly social media is that platform that again can be controversial. Twitter is a harsh platform, people say it like it is. But it also gives us a sense that this issue is divisive if you have to judge from some of the harsh comments that come through on social media in support of either the Israeli camp or the Palestinian camp. I want to just go through one or two responses that came through on social media following that press conference. I think generally, and this is quite inspiring, that the apology was welcome. Apologies are important in a world of conflict.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very important. It's a big stepping stone for peace, and it creates that fundamental shift. It has ripple effects, etc. So I think many people applauded the fact that she was sincere in her apology. One said an apology is an apology. That's it. But there were other sentiments that came through, some skeptical sentiments around her apology, and I just want to read one or two of it. The first one that came through, because I was broadcasting live on Facebook at the time, was that she's being bullied by BDS. So there was some doubt around the sincerity of BDS involvement In fact, there were many people that felt that BDS is a bully, I suppose because you are so strong in your campaign for support for the Palestinian conflict. And because there's so much of support, people feel so strongly about this humanitarian issue. If you're not on the Palestinian camp and you express an alternate view, then it's interpreted as you being bullied. So that sentiment was expressed here, that she was bullied. Regardless of the fact that she maintained in a statement that she initiated conversation with BDS, and then the comment from the same person followed. Deep down, she's terrified for her safety and financial future, and many feel that it was actually an attempt to starve off the negative response that she received for posting that on Twitter, and also to starve off the negative response from her business community. So maybe just share more light in terms of your engagement with Shashi, what led to the press conference.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a few things. Firstly, I think as BDS South Africa, we welcome the fact that there was an outcry on social media. I think that this is really an indication and a sign of the hard-fought freedoms that we have in this country. We have this thing called freedom of expression. And I think that we really must rejoice in the idea of public figures, whether they are politicians, whether they are former presidents of our country, for example, or whether they are celebrities. They must be taken up to public scrutiny, and this is just an indication of a vibrant society. So those that are trying to suggest that this engagement is a form of intimidation or bullying, really you can't construe any engagement that one has as bullying and intimidation. Serious examples of bullying, intimidation or violence must be reported to relevant authorities. So those that are trying to suggest that there is violence or intimidation or bullying, we really urge them to go and lodge such complaints with relevant authorities. Until they do, I think that we really are very skeptical of the source of or rather the motivation for them throwing around this accusation of bullying and intimidation. Secondly, I think that there is a good amount of sexism that we did see during this issue. People were really mean, vulgar. When, for example, Shashi Naidu took on the idea of going through to Palestine, people were sexist. Oh, what will you know about Palestine if you travel there? You should just keep quiet about this issue. These are pro-Israeli supporters on social media, trying to dissuade her from going through to Palestine. And this sort of sexism really must be condemned in the strongest forms because it really has no space. And then I think that for those that were watching the press conference, you really saw a sincere person there.
I did. Really in fact, she was very sincere. And when I also reached out to the comments and I said, look, this was a sincere effort to reconcile differences.
And Shashi has gone beyond just words. Shashi has said, no, not only am I apologizing, I'm also going to be undertaking a practical form of trying to make good. And that is, I want to go to Palestine on both a fact-finding and a humanitarian trip to meet with Palestinians, to engage with Palestinians, to listen and to learn and to share this information. And really, we need to find the generosity of spirit within ourselves to be open to people that apologize. We really must become more humble and kind to those around us that make mistakes. And this is really what we are urging people to do. And I think that by and large, Shashi Naidu's apology and her indication that she will be participating in this trip has been welcomed positively. And we think that there's only but good that has come out of this saga. As for the fact that BDS South Africa in particular has bullied Shashi Naidu, this is the furthest from the truth. I mean, the fact of the matter is that this saga started off, I think, on a Saturday or a Sunday. BDS South Africa didn't enter this year until, I think, Monday, when Shashi Naidu had sent us a DM on Instagram with her telephone number and asking us to call her. I didn't even know who Shashi Naidu was until I was asked by a board member of our organization, or by our media person of our organization, to please contact this person. And so really it was the opposite way around. Shashi Naidu had approached us and wanted to make good on this issue.
Right. She came across as genuinely sincere to me, and I think that is highly commendable. I suppose she also had to hold herself accountable because she's a public figure, and she realized from the backlash that she's dealing with a very serious situation regarding the Palestinian, making comments around the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So that was commendable that she held herself accountable as well at the press conference. She mentioned, and you talked about her trip to to Palestine. So I just want to read one comment. So there's huge expectations because she's a public figure. At Shashi Naidu, on our way to see you utilize the very same social media cross-platforms to lobby for an end to oppression in all lands and to lobby whom chose to be silent, to be more outspoken against the oppressors. She did say that she is just going there as on an educational trip, but certainly it opens up this question, because she's a public figure, what role will she play? Do you have insight on that?
I think that every person that has gone, every black person, black meaning Indian, colored, African, that has gone, or every person that has participated in our struggle against apartheid, any person that's aware of our struggle against apartheid, that has visited Palestine, has come back saying that not only is the situation similar to the experience that black people faced under apartheid here in South Africa, but in many ways the Israeli oppression against Palestinians is much worse. We don't see why Shashi Naidu won't come back with a similar conclusion that, for example, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Professor John Dugard, Winnie Mandela, for example, when she had visited, various others that had visited and come back with this conclusion. There's just no way to explain how Israel builds an 8-meter high, 800-kilometer long wall that separates Palestinians, that virtually encircles Palestinians into ghettos. There's no way to explain this here other than using the word apartheid or using the word oppression. And so we are very confident and excited actually at the idea of Shashi Naidu not only seeing and witnessing when she's there, but also coming back and sharing that information, because very importantly, during her press conference, she admitted that I've lost sponsorship, I've lost business deals over this issue. People that were offended at the post that she had put up, which came across as very pro-Israeli. That she admitted that she has lost all of this, but she said that what I do have is my voice. Nobody can take that away from me. Mm-hmm. And she said that she would like to use her voice to make good and to bring attention to human rights issues. And so we really hope that on her return that we'll have many more followers in the BDS movement and in the Palestinian struggle.
And she also said with a great deal of humility that she's received an education, to quote her, in the process, with a great deal of humility, admitting to her lack of knowledge and understanding of the actual Palestinian crisis. But just to put into context, again, coming back to what we spoke about earlier, the freedom of expression that you mentioned, and I want to put this into context because she did receive this massive social media backlash. BDS has been at the forefront of driving support for the Palestinian cause as well. And whenever there's an issue that is raised there, the conflict reemerges in Palestine, people take to social media. And when she posted that, nobody knew that she did not read what she posted, because she asked for assistance and copied and pasted that on Twitter. So they naturally responded because she's a public figure again. And that has also created this mixed emotion around her comments, etc. But what I'm saying is that there's always been a backlash in support of the Palestinian cause against anyone that comes across as pro-Israel. What are some of the importance BDS has learned from this incident in terms of driving forward your own communication strategy?
I think that by and large, firstly, we must commend the fact that there's a growing number of people that support the Palestinian issue on social media, but also more generally. I mean, it was maybe perhaps unheard of 20 years ago, where you would have, I think 20 years ago, if you expressed something that's pro-Palestinian, you may have been attacked. Nowadays, I think that because more people are conscientized around this issue, and to be honest with you, through social media, because nowadays you have people in Palestine that are able to post videos, that are able to post pictures, that are able to share information in real time. And this has assisted in conscientizing our people. This has assisted in giving the necessary empowerment to our people, so that when such an issue comes up, people are able to respond from a point of education rather than from a point of ignorance. I do think that one of the lessons from from this whole saga is for us to always continuously be doing the kind of awareness-raising work that we do, both not only on social media, but also through various events and campaigns. I mean, for example, we run a campaign called Israeli Apartheid Week. This is a campaign that has been endorsed by over 150 South African organizations. It has about 250 events across the country during a period of 1 week. And in this week, you have former presidents, you have government ministers, you have musicians and artists, sports people all participating in this campaign. But there is a need for us to not just have Israeli Apartheid Week every year, but to have campaigns throughout the year. And this is where we're really urging viewers and listeners to this program and to other and on other platforms to join us in creating more awareness about this issue, because really when South Africans in particular participate in giving solidarity and support to the Palestinian issue, it really is not a favor, it's not an act of charity. In many ways, it's a duty that we have to the Palestinians, because it was, after all, the Palestinians, long before it was fashionable or sexy, it was the Palestinians that gave us financial support, that gave us other forms of political solidarity and various other forms of assistance during the darkest days of our own apartheid. And so when we talk about solidarity with the Palestinians, we're really talking about giving back the solidarity that we once received during the struggle against apartheid.
There was another interesting comment that came through while I was doing that live broadcast, and someone referred to you as Mohammed Desai shoot the Jew. And I wondered what he meant by that.
Well, you know, it really goes back to an incident about 3 or 4 years ago at Wits University, where various organizations had come together, various youth organizations. It actually wasn't BDS South Africa that organized a protest against a visiting Israeli musician, if I remember correctly. And there is this famous South African struggle song called Dubula Ibunu, Shoot the Boer.
Yeah.
And this song often gets converted and gets used with different words. Dubula Ibunu maybe gets converted sometimes to Dubula I, whatever the protest of the day is. And so there was a group of people that were singing Dubula Ijuta, Shoot the Jew. And for them it was about, I mean, for many people there's this conflation between Israelis and Jews, not realizing that there's a big difference between being Jewish and being Israeli, being a Jewish person and being a Jewish person that supports Israel. And so people were singing the song, and a journalist had once asked me, so what is the comment from BDS South Africa? I actually didn't know the song was being sung. I was informed by the journalist. And I said, look, we condemn this. This is anti-Semitism, that we don't stand for any of this. And in fact, if I was present during the singing of the song, I would have definitely put an end to it. And I had explained the context of the song. That look, during the 80s, the song here was sung, and people interpreted this, or rather, let me say that the Israeli lobby has used their own interpretation of me providing an explanation and me condemning the song. The Israeli lobby has used the fact that I was providing this explanation as a way to suggest that I was actually singing the song, which is untrue. I don't sing, by the way, I can't sing. And to even suggest that I was defending the song. And so this is one of the baseless accusations that are, for example, thrown against me just because I stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. And this sort of character, victimization, and this sort of attacking one's character by the Israeli lobby is only but too familiar to us. The Israeli lobby tries to attack, for example, Roger Waters because of this, the lead singer of Pink Floyd, for his support of the Palestinian struggle, trying to suggest that he's an anti-Semite. They try to use this here against various artists, musicians, and they will probably use this here against Shashi Naidoo very soon. When she expresses her support for the Palestinian struggle, they'll try to suggest that she too is an anti-Semite. But really, they're doing themselves a disservice against real acts of anti-Semitism, which must be condemned. But when you try to suggest that criticism of Israel is a form of anti-Semitism, this is really untrue, and this is really baseless, and this is really not contributing towards really taking on racism.
Sure. I was actually quite interested in getting an explanation for that, because when I worked on a documentary with you 3 years ago, there was so much of Jewish support for the Palestinian cause, and I wondered where that comment actually came from. And judging from my interaction with you, I thought, what? Why would someone say something like that? So thank you so much for clarifying that. We could go on and on this issue, but please just give us, bring us up to date in terms of the current situation in Palestine on the ground today.
Sure. I mean, look, the current situation on the ground in terms of the humanitarian part of things is really tragic. It's really sad. It's really heartbreaking. For example, just one example I can share with viewers is that the Gaza Strip, this is the most densely populated piece of land on the earth. Archbishop Tutu and others have referred to it as the largest open-air prison in the world. This is an area 14 kilometers wide by 40 kilometers long. It has over 1.7 million people. The land borders, the sea borders, the air borders are all fully controlled by Israel. Israel doesn't allow anybody in. Israel doesn't allow people out, or very rarely allows people out. People are literally dying due to cancer, whereas they could get medication if only Israel had allowed the medication to be allowed, had allowed the medication in. This is an area where Israel also bombs every 2 or 3 years. In 2014, Israel killed over 2,500 Palestinians, including more than 550 children under the age of 16. 2 years before that, Israel killed 1,500 Palestinians, of which more than 300 of them were children under the age of 16. It's really an experiment, it would seem, by Israel in human suffering. This is just one indication of how Israel oppresses and tries to keep the Palestinians into ghettos, hoping that they will hoping that they will submit to Israeli authority and Israeli subjugation and oppression. However, I think that whilst on the one hand you have this very dire oppression, on the other hand you also have people that are refusing to submit on their knees and rather insisting to resist on their feet. And this is the kind of spirit that we saw in our own townships during the 1980s.
Sure.
People refusing to submit on their knees, people insisting to fight on their feet. And so you have, for example, in the last 6 weeks, in the last 3 months actually, Palestinians every Friday coming out to protest at the fence that separates them from the Gaza ghetto, for example, and Israel itself. People have been coming out there in their thousands to protest. People that have been coming out, literally the people that have keys to their houses, they can see their homes on the other side of the fence. These are homes that were captured by Israel when Israel was created in 1948, but people who are prevented to return to their homes, and the only crime being that they are Palestinian, that they are born the wrong race. And I think that the one positive part of things is that within Israel itself, you're seeing a growing number of Jews, a growing number of Israelis that are beginning to support the Palestinian struggle, just as how during our own struggle against apartheid, you had a small but an important number of white people, Ronnie Kestrels, Bayez Nadi, and various others that joined the struggle against apartheid. And I think that one of the biggest myths that the Israel regime that we're talking about today is the same Israel of the Bible, the biblical land of Israel, that the Israelis that we're talking about today are the same as the Israelites of the Bible. This myth is really being shattered in the last 2 or 3 years with the increasing number of churches like the Presbyterian Church, the Methodist Church, the United Church of Christ, that have all adopted the BDS boycott of Israel and are insisting that the Palestinian Christians are an important part of Palestinian society, and that the Palestinian issue is really not a religious issue, but a human rights issue. I think that this myth that it's a religious issue and that it's a Jewish, Muslim or Jewish Christian issue is really being destroyed in the last 2 or 3 years. And so really those of us that are part of the BDS movement, that are part of the solidarity movement, we are only but hopeful. And we do think that in the next foreseeable future, there will be a resolution to this issue, and there really will be peace and justice for all the people of that land.
Mohammed Desai, thank you so much for your time today. And on that note, as you were reflecting on the 2014 war in Gaza, we are going to play out a documentary that we produced that actually reflects the national sentiment here. And I think it's a fair reflection because we actually see thousands and thousands of South Africans out in support for this humanitarian cause in the Middle East. Thank you so much for your time.